Hi everybody, welcome to Shivers. Today we are doing our second movie review of the year for the new movie Imaginary, which is the latest of the Blumhouse series that came out last Friday, March 8th. This Imaginary movie follows Jessica, who is the stepmother to Alice and Taylor. Jessica's married to Max, who's in the movie for maybe 5 minutes, and his ex-wife is Samantha, who is now locked up in a mental institution. So Jessica and Max are living a pretty normal life. Jessica has recurring nightmares of something that happened to her when she was a child and decides to move back into her childhood home after her father is moved into hospice care, and basically hoping that she can figure out what happened when she was a kid because she has no real memories of it. So they move into her childhood home, her nightmares stop, and Alice is wandering around and finds this little teddy bear. And the teddy bear says that his name is Chauncey. So the whole rest of the movie pretty much revolves around Alice and Chauncey. Chauncey gives Alice all of these different tasks to do. Put something in this basket that hurts you, that you're afraid of, that you love, from someone you love. And is basically going on the scavenger hunt of things to collect and do. Jessica is trying to ask questions, and Alice is like, no, this is between me and Chauncey. So she, one night, is then having a tea party with Chauncey. Jessica's just peeking in the hallway, and the door is slightly ajar so you can't see the whole table. And Alice is like, oh, I love your dress, you look so pretty. And all you hear is, thank you. And so it's not Chauncey's voice, it's a real voice. So Jessica busts into the room, and it's Alice and Taylor's mother, who must have escaped from the mental institution wherever she is. So they have this whole basically fight, and Taylor, which is the teenage daughter, apologizes. She says she's been texting with her mom. Don't know how her mom has a phone, but she's been texting with her mom and wanted to basically go home, wanted to be away from Jessica's house and away from Jessica, because it's the typical stepmother story. So I wish at that point the movie took a turn and that this imaginary friend was the result of some sort of passed down schizophrenia, not that it was an actual imaginary friend. Regardless, that's all we see of Samantha. So we have this sort of background storyline where the girl's mother has these mental issues enough to be in an institution, and we don't explore that any further. So that's my mark number 1. So as the movie goes along, Chauncey's asking Alice to do all of these sketchy things. And the one day Jessica's looking out the back window and sees that Alice is yanking a piece of wood from their fence, puts the wood face up with the nail up in it, and goes to slam her hand down onto it. Thankfully, Jessica stops it, pulls the board away, and Alice apologizes time and time again. She said, Chauncey made me do it. So Jessica calls a childhood therapist or psychologist to talk to Alice, and Alice is then talking to the therapist about Chauncey, about the things that he's making her do, and the therapist says, why don't you say that, tell Chauncey like how he's making you feel. So she says, I don't think I should play with you anymore, Chauncey. I don't think we should be friends. And then you hear Chauncey respond in the same voice as Alice, but very try hard to be scary. And so it ends up being a very silly moment. The therapist then goes out into the hallway talking to Jessica, and she's like, is Alice practicing ventriloquism? Because I've never heard a little girl speak like that before. So very, very cheesy moment. The therapist is then talking to Jessica and says that this very similar story has happened before, and shows her this video of a kid who cut off his own thumb because his imaginary friend Chauncey told him to do so. So Jessica goes digging, talks to her old neighbor who was her babysitter when she was a kid, and her neighbor said that Jessica had basically the same thing, had a childhood friend named Chauncey, did all these things, and then she just quote unquote disappeared. Jessica then goes and talks to her father, who's in the hospice care, and is trying to get any information that she can out of him, even though he's pretty senile. And he starts freaking out and he's like, I'm like this because you disappeared. I had to find you and you disappeared. So, long story short, we now fast forward closer towards the ending. And all of those things that Chauncey had Alice gather perform this sort of ritual. As you light them all together on fire, it opens up this door to an imagination world. So she goes into the imagination world. Jessica then does her own scavenger hunt of sorts, gathers her items, and goes in after Alice. So the babysitter, who's now an old lady, the teenager Taylor, and Jessica are all in this imagination world looking for Alice. So, of course, it's a spooky world. There's these creatures around and all of these different rooms where it's kind of like Monsters, Inc. Like, you imagine all of these monsters are just going into these different rooms. So, she goes into these rooms trying to find Alice. She finally finds her and attempts to get her out. And then the old woman, the babysitter, doesn't want them to leave because she thinks that the world is magical. So they lock her in a room. She gets offed and they escape. And this is where I wish the movie would end. They end up having conversation. They're back at the hospice care with Jessica's dad. Everybody's there. And she's like, Dad, I know what you did for me. You saved me from this world. I'm so sorry. And he's talking to her and he's like, it's okay. Like, as long as you're okay, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's all happy. And she goes, am I still here? And then the walls start melting and she's in the imagination world. I wish that's where the movie ended, but it didn't. And we then spend the next 10 minutes rewatching what we just watched of them trying to escape this world. They finally get out, of course, and then they light the house on fire. And they go to a hotel to stay, and then there's a little boy who's talking to his imaginary friend Chauncey. And that's how the movie ends. So Chauncey is still around, is still this demon of sorts that wants to take on other children's imaginations and powers and their souls. And that's it. That's the movie. So in terms of the actual rating scale, for the story itself, I would give it a 3 out of 5. I think having that play on imagination and the childhood friends and the access to children, I'm always a fan of that when it comes to movies like Sinister and stuff like that. So I liked that story. However, for originality, I would give it a 1 out of 5. This felt like I watched this movie 10 times over. It's nothing new. It's literally same shit, different story. It's the same thing. We see, as it is a Blumhouse movie, we see the same steps in how to solve a problem. We have the problem, we have them go digging, we have them do research, looking to history, and then confront whatever monster or ghost or goblin it is. So it's the same thing. It doesn't feel like you're watching anything new. For the acting, I would give it either a 3.5 or a 4 out of 5. I thought everybody was a pretty decent actor, besides that scene where Alice is talking to the teddy bear. It's just so corny and so cheesy and just feels really fake. For production, I would give it either a 4.5 or a 5 out of 5. It is a Blumhouse movie. It's a big movie. They have enough setting and characters and all of that to keep it interesting. However, I do think they spent too much time on the marketing side of things, especially for the imagination world. You know, before this movie even came out, they turned it into a haunted house to basically be a promo for the movie. And it's very evident that they made it in the movie so that they could promote it as such, which I don't like that. You know, make the movie and then make the material. So, and then for scares, I would give it a 1 out of 5. This is by no means whatsoever a scary movie. It's PG-13. You don't see any gore. They say the F word only one time. There's nothing at all scary about it. There's no jump scares, nothing. So, all of that to be said, this movie comes in at a 2.6 out of 5, which I know is not so great. But I went into this movie with really high expectations. I thought that it was going to be a good play on a ghost story, and it ended up being pretty cheesy, pretty hokey, and nothing different than we have seen before. So I would say if you want something to watch in the background, if you're having a cleaning day and like some noise, then I would put it on, even in the background of, trick-or-treaters for Halloween. Like, it's fun, and it's horror-themed, but it's not scary. So let me know your thoughts in the comments if you've seen it.